Hello. The revolutionary ideas of the Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik, concerning chuva are probably the most well-known and closely studied aspects of his great career in rabbinics and in philosophy. It has drawn a lot of attention from academics as well as rabbis and ordinary Jewish citizens who are trying to get a hold in life and what's expected of them and what's available to them. In particular, because of the Rav's revolutionary understanding of chuva, meaning that it is not repentance, it is not trying to erase or correct some past misdeed, but it is rather an opportunity to go back and restart oneself, refinish oneself, recreate oneself for a better present and future. And the theory itself, and in particular his explicit references to a great span of philosophers, Jewish and non-Jewish, Nietzsche and Spinoza and others, is really what perks the interests of many academics, and a lot has been written about this aspect of chuva, and it's probably the theme that arises most clearly from the edited selection of the Rav's lectures on chuva that was put out by Pinchas Peli and is available now in Hebrew, English, and I think other studies in other languages as well. But there's a lot more to be said about it, and I am now in the process of gathering together the many different pronouncements of the Rav on chuva, not just as a sort of way of restarting one's life, but also some of the things he says about chuva being something that is sort of built into the cosmos, that is at the same time rational but miraculous. And I would like in this very short video to focus on, I think, what is the most problematic aspect for those who are trying to make the Rav's pronouncements on chuva into a holistic and consistent and theory. And that is, what about kappara? Kappara is atonement in the almost most primitive sense of sacrificial rituals that were done in the temple, sacrificing live animals, sprinkling their blood on the altar, the whole rituals of Yom Kippur, and the prayers that continue to beg for forgiveness, to look forward to the rebuilding of the temple when we can have these actual sacrifices, and so on. How does this match? How can this be reconciled with his idea of chuva, not as trying to undo an action in the past, but as something that is to sort of travel backwards in time to the past and take your life on a new direction from them with a different heading and orientation. So I would like to just speak briefly about that, and in the future, I hope maybe to be able to publish a more full study on the various sides and aspects of the Rav's understanding of chuva. Now, I would like to present my understanding of how kappara and chuva harmonize on the basis of a passage in Maimonides' guide. I'm not sure that the Rav actually referenced this in any of his talks on chuva. It doesn't appear in the book written by Pinchas Peli. But, of course, the Rambam, Maimonides, is always relevant to the Rav, and the Rav is always relevant to understanding Maimonides. And I just want briefly to acknowledge that the only person I know who's brought this passage into discussion is the Rav's grandson, Rav Meir Twersky, now at YU, in a lecture that is available in audio at the YU Torah website, my point of departure, my understanding of the problem, and my resolution are very different. But because I have such great respect for Rav Meir, I wanted to at least mention his talk. And now in the third and concluding segment of this video, I will give you my take on the matter. So, the critical passage, which I think allows us to harmonize chuva and kappara, is found in Maimonides' God of the Perplexed, Part 3, Chapter 36. And as I said, it is cited by Rav Meir Twersky, but without giving the actual textual source. I will cite it from the latest translation of the guide into English by Lynn Goodman and Philip Lieberman, but I have modified the critical sentence because I think that though the Goodman-Lieberman translation is the most reader-friendly, it's the most accessible to your average reader of English. There are times when one needs a more literal translation to get at the full sense of what Maimonides is saying, and so I've done that here. Now, this section of Part 3 of the guide is devoted to Tamei HaMitzvot, the rationales for the commandments, and it's important to know that it was written after Maimonides had completed and disseminated his Mishnah Torah. So the group that he is talking about here in chapter 36 are, as he says in the guide, all of the commandments that fit the first of the 14 books of Mishnah Torah, Sefer Hamadah, which have to do with basic doctrines of Judaism. Call them beliefs, call them doctrines. Maimonides would call them in Arabic i'tikad, which means not something that one takes on faith, but something which one has looked into, pondered, investigated, reflected upon, and become convinced of its truth, and therefore it has really become bound to oneself. It's become assimilated to oneself. And among these, of course, in the Sefer Hamadah, the last section is chuva. And here I begin to quote, Maimonides says chuva, in writing in Arabic as he does in the guide and elsewhere, but important terms from the Jewish religion he will bring in Hebrew, so with the definite article in Arabic. So instead of saying, so he'll say al teshuva, teshuva clearly belongs to this group as an idea that religious people need to believe in. I'm not quoting from the guide. For a person will inevitably slip and sin, not knowing to view a trait that is truly better, or because some appetite or animus has gotten the better of him. If one believed the rift irreparable, he might persist in his error or stray further, seeing no alternative. Now the sentence that I have modified in my translation. But with the belief, i'tikad in teshuva, he will correct himself and begin again, yargio, in a better state, and as something more perfect than what had been before he sinned. That is why so many practices are prescribed to support this sound and wholesome outlook: confessions, viduyim, and sacrifices for unwitting and even some willful sins, and fasts. What all forms of penitence have in common, regardless of the sin, is its renunciation. That is the purpose of this outlook. Hence, the benefit of all of this is now clear. Maimonides makes it clear that there is one single purpose to the whole apparatus of repentance, chuva as described in the Torah, as well as the viduyim, the confessions made in the temple over the sacrifices, and ever since in the prayers, especially in Yom Kippur, but actually in the daily prayers of many Jews. The sacrifices of the temple rituals and the fasts. All of these serve to reinforce the belief that we can reform, we can correct our behavior, and even launch ourselves toward a better and more perfect state. This, especially the idea that with chuva one can not only rectify, but make us into much better humans than we were before the transgression, lies at the heart of Maimonides' chuva. Now here's a key point, again from my perspective, as a Yemenite Maimonidean still living in the Middle Ages with that philosophical outlook. All of the religious acts done in its connection serve the same purpose: to strengthen our belief in the possibility and efficacy of chuva. In other words, as Maimonides brings them all in one single list, they're all on the same plane. The Yom Kippur sacrifices in the temple, the actual rituals that are performed once a year by the high priest in the temple, are on the same plane as the prayers that we now say, the same plane of the viduyim that we can say throughout the year, and all other religious acts that are connected to chuva. They're all on the same plane, and they all serve the same purpose. The purpose is to strengthen our belief that one can improve, that all is not lost if one has sinned. He doesn't mention anything about changing something in the higher worlds, or changing something, obtaining something that one can call kappara. They're all tools, they're all instruments. This is the Maimonides' view of ritual in general, and religious law in general. They are meant to inculcate in us certain beliefs. It's not enough simply to have it written in the book, you can improve, you can do chuva. It's important, given the anthropology, if you wish, of Maimonides, understanding how human beings work, that they perform rituals that give them to feel that this is really happening, this is really effective in changing my life. Now, I would just like to take a few minutes to talk about the verb that I vocalized, that the chuva allows us not to begin again, which is again is the critical point in seeing how this understanding of Maimonides and the guide is exactly what the Rav talks about. The chuva allows us not only to sort of take care of what we have done, but to start it over again and get to an even better place. The usual meaning of raja, the verb that's used here, is to return. So in this context, its use in terms of repentance is very similar to that of teshuva. And it does appear in the Quran in one place anyway, in the sense of turning inward to self-reflection and confronting one's own wrongdoing. But the term used in Arabic most commonly to refer to repentance is tauba, which seems to me to be related to the Hebrew root of chuva, shuv. But that's less critical. What's important here is that the semantic field of raja is very wide. It need not mean simply to return to a previous state, but like the English restore or refinish, it may mean to return to an improved version of that state. When we talk about refinishing furniture, we're not talking about just about, taking care of the scratches and dents and putting on a fresh coat of paint. A refinished piece of furniture or a finished artifact is supposedly not as good as new, but better than new. And this is what chuva does. It gets us back not as good as new, but even better than new. And in fact, in his dictionary of Judeo-Arabic, Professor Blau lists one of the meanings of raja to turn to something new. So I argue that Maimonides asserts that one is restored to a better condition than the original one. The Baal Tshuva begins life again as a more wholesome, accomplished individual. And this is very much in line with the Reb's understanding. So this is, I think, at least one interesting point. And as I said, I am hoping to gather together as many sources as I can. The Rav, of course, there's a huge amount of material that the Rav wrote that was published after his passing that are available on video and on audio and so on, and memories. And I myself, from childhood and growing up in the Boston area, attending Maimonides school, attending the Rav's shiurim, the big philosophy shiur on Motzei Shabbos on Saturday nights, and the much smaller Gemara shiur, or sometimes we learned other books on Sunday mornings, and even davening with the Rav in Onset, Massachusetts, as a small child in the maybe the late 50s or early 60s. I don't remember the exact years, when actually my late father and the Rav's late brother-in-law, Simi Gerber, were the chazanim. So I have also my own reminiscences, things that I recall. And all this I hope to put together in one written paper, but that's something for the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and kol tuv.